Welcome back, everyone. You know how much I love digging into new language learning techniques, and today's deep dive is a real gem. We're going back in time to explore the ideas of Charlotte Mason.
A true pioneer in education. She was already shaking things up in the late 19th, early 20th century.
It's fascinating, right? In her time, it was all about rote memorization, drilling those grammar rules.
Oh, endless drills. But Mason, she saw things differently.
So imagine this. You want to learn a new language. Mason says, ditch the textbooks, forget those lists of vocabulary, just listen to a captivating story.
And here's the kicker. You retell it. In your own words. That's it.
It's like, wait, really? That's all? But that's the beauty of her approach, right?
It's deceptively simple. Mason called this narration, and she believed it was the key to unlocking fluency. You listen deeply, and then by actively recalling and retelling, you internalize the language.
It makes you think about how we all learned our first language. No one's giving babies grammar lessons. They just soak it all in.
Exactly. They listen, they mimic, they experiment. Mason tapped into that natural, innate ability we all have. Her students, they weren't just memorizing grammar rules. They were absorbing them organically through stories and engaging texts.
And get this, there's this incredible story from Mason's work. Students listened to a French story just once, and then...
Oh, I know this one. They were able to retell it with amazing detail.
Le chevalier Segua. One listen, and it's basically imprinted in their minds. Incredible.
That's the power of active recall. When you have to pull information from your memory, put it into your own words, it cements those connections in your brain, like building a mental muscle.
So instead of dissecting sentences like some kind of scientific experiment.
You're getting a feel for the rhythm and flow of the language naturally.
Exactly. You're learning grammar by using it, not by memorizing a bunch of rules beforehand.
It's just like we did as kids, right?
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. How much formal grammar did you actually know before you started studying in school?
Not much, to be honest. I'm sure my early sentences were a bit all over the place.
But you learned by doing, by experimenting, by immersing yourself in language. And that's what Mason was getting at. She believed in giving students challenging texts, even if they didn't understand every single word at first.
So it's like that saying, you learn by doing, right?
Exactly. Grappling with complex language, it pushes you beyond your comfort zone. It forces you to engage more deeply. And that's where the real learning happens. It's much more effective than just sticking to overly simplified materials.
I love that. It's like exploring a new city. You could study a map all day, but actually walking the streets, getting a little lost, that's how you truly understand the layout.
Such a great analogy, and that gets to the heart of Mason's philosophy. She wasn't just interested in surface-level learning, She wanted students to really internalize the language, develop an intuition for it.
And a key part of that, it seems, was her emphasis on building what she called a copious vocabulary. But it wasn't about just using big words to sound smart.
Oh, absolutely not.
It was about giving students the tools to think clearly and express themselves with precision.
And this is where it gets even more interesting. Mason was really concerned with what she saw as a decline in the quality of language. She called it a national distress.
A national distress. Wow. And this was over a century ago.
Over a century ago, she worried that people's vocabularies were shrinking, limiting their ability to think and communicate effectively.
It really makes you think, especially today, with all the information overload we face, have we lost something in how we use language? Do we even really think about the words we use?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it's something worth pondering as we go deeper into Mason's approach. Because for her, vocabulary, it wasn't just about amassing words. It was about unlocking the full potential of thought itself. It's like we've prioritized speed over precision, haven't we? We have access to more words than ever before.
But are we actually using them? Really using them well?
Right. Are we even absorbing them deeply? Or are we just skimming the surface? It makes you wonder.
It does make you think about Mason's emphasis on context. She believed that a truly rich vocabulary came from encountering words within those well-crafted sentences, not just in isolation.
Absolutely. It's about seeing how words interact, those subtle shades of meaning, the music of language itself.
It's not just about knowing a lot of words.
It's about understanding their power.
The nuance.
The way they work together to create beauty and meaning.
Like, it's one thing to know the names of all the colors in the spectrum.
But it's another thing entirely to really see and appreciate the subtle variations in a sunset.
Exactly. And that kind of appreciation for language.
That depth of understanding.
Comes from immersing yourself in it, experiencing it in all its richness.
And that's where those engaging stories come in?
Right. Mason wasn't advocating for dry textbooks or simplified materials.
No way. She wanted students to be transported, to feel the language come alive, to get lost in the world of the story.
Because when you're truly engaged, when you're curious, that's when the real learning takes hold.
It's that leading a horse to water idea.
You can't force it to drink.
But you can make the water so enticing that it can't resist.
And I think that's what Mason was aiming for with her approach.
To create an environment where students were naturally drawn to language.
Where they were eager to explore it, to make it their own.
And don't forget the power of narration in all this.
So important. It's one thing to passively read or listen to a story.
But it's another thing entirely to have to actively recall it, to use that language yourself.
Because that's when you really start to own it.
Think about it. Have you ever read something and then realized afterward that you couldn't remember a single thing?
Oh, all the time.
Yeah.
Like it just went in one ear and out the other?
That's passive learning. But when you have to retell something to explain it in your own words, that's when the real magic happens.
It's like taking a hike through the woods.
Okay, I like this.
You might enjoy the scenery as you're walking.
You might even feel like you're paying attention.
But if you really want to remember the path, you have to be deliberate about it.
You have to note the landmarks, the turns,
the obstacles,
the unexpected discoveries along the way.
Exactly. And that's what Mason understood about learning. It's not a passive process. It's an active engagement.
It's about wrestling with the material, making it your own.
And that's what leads to those aha moments.
Those moments of deep, lasting understanding.
The kind of learning experiences that spark a lifelong love of language. It's amazing, isn't it? We're talking about ideas from over a century ago.
And yet they feel so relevant.
Like we've come full circle.
Back to these fundamental truths about how we learn best.
And it makes you wonder if these principles are so powerful for language learning.
Could they be applied more broadly?
Exactly. Could we use these methods to unlock a deeper understanding of, say, history or science, even music?
Absolutely. Imagine, instead of just passively listening to a lecture or reading a textbook,
you then challenge yourself to teach it to someone else.
To explain those key concepts in your own words.
No more zoning out halfway through a chapter.
You'd have to really engage with the material.
Wrestle with it until you internalized it.
And that active engagement.
That process of making the knowledge your own.
That's what leads to true mastery.
It's like you can admire a beautiful painting in a museum.
Right.
But to really understand it, you have to try a painting yourself.
To grapple with the colors, the composition.
To feel the brushstroke.
It's in the act of creation that we deepen our understanding.
And that's what I find so inspiring about Mason's approach.
It's about empowering learners to become creators.
Not just passive consumers of information.
It's about cultivating that insatiable curiosity.
That thirst for knowledge.
That drive to keep learning and growing throughout our lives.
Well, this has been a fascinating deep dive.
It really has.
I feel like I'm walking away with a whole new toolkit for learning.
Me too. And I think the most important takeaway is this.
What's that?
The journey of learning is never truly finished. There's always more to discover, more to explore, more to master. So keep that curiosity alive.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Until next time, everyone, happy learning.